Hello, Stitchers. Welcome to Stitch Please, the official podcast of Black Women Stitch, the sewing group where Black Lives Matter. I'm your host, Lisa Woolfork. I'm a fourth-generation sewing enthusiast with more than 20 years of sewing experience. I am looking forward to today's conversation, so sit back, relax, and get ready to get your stitch together. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Stitch Please podcast. This is Lisa. Thank you so much for being here today and for listening. Today's topic is sewing with stickers. Yes, sewing with stickers. In some ways, this episode is like an extension of the unconventional materials episode that I had a few weeks ago, the one about sewing beyond the fabric store. This is kind of a take on that. I'm not sure if I listed office supply stores as an example of one. I might have, but I thought that this was an opportunity to really dive into what sewing with stickers could mean for your sewing life. Part of this comes from the fact that I am a total nerd. I love stationery. I love pencils, pens, glitter pens, markers, tape. I am just getting into washi tape, W-A-S-H-I, which is very popular in the planner world. I try very, very hard not to get into washi. I might only own maybe 15 small spools of washi tape, but I know people who have hundreds upon hundreds of rolls of washi tape. I like all those little planners, organizers, journals. I really love stationery and office supplies. So it's no surprise that I have found a way to find things that are sewing related at such stores. So just beyond, before we get into the stickers, it's a little bit about, things like pencil cases. Those are really good for sewing supplies. There's so much, if you just walk around an office supply store, stuff that you're going to see that will be useful to you. Protractors, compasses. These are all like things that you can use in your sewing. But we are going to divide the episode into two parts today. The first part, or the first half, we're going to talk about how we can use stickers to mark our tools and equipment. And then in the second part, we'll talk about how we can use them for garment construction in particular. And I have a nice short voice memo from Nikki from Atlanta Sewing Style and for Sewing My Style. And Nikki's wonderful. She's really just a great all-around person. And she has shared with us how she uses stickers. And so I thought, well, this could be really good to include so that I'm not the only person who's doing this, and that she is an expert sewist. And we're going to hear from her from a wonderful voice memo about how she uses stickers too. So let's just jump right in. One of the first ways I like to use the adhesive stickers is to mark my supplies. So one of the things, I'm going to get into a lot of detail about the dimensions of the stickers that I use. But the first thing I wanted to share is these return address labels. Now, return address labels are those little tiny labels that go in the upper left-hand corner of the envelopes when you send mail throughout the U.S. They're 1/2 inch tall and 1 3/4 inch wide, and you get, let's see, I'm looking at my package here. You get 80 per sheet, and they're designed to fit in an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and you get 80 labels. Now, I've used those I use them a lot for garment construction, which I'll talk about after the break, but this is also a way to mark, like say, for example, you're going to a sewing class. Right? When you go to a sewing class, particularly for a quilt making or a bag class, everybody has the same rulers. They are pretty much identical. Everybody has the Omnigrid yellow ruler that's 24 by 6. Everyone's got that square, that's 6.5 by 6.5. All of these tools look exactly the same. So how can you tell yours from anybody else's? And one thing I like to do is to put stickers on mine. And even if you don't use a whole full address label for your sticker, because I know you don't want it to interfere with the markings on being able to see the markings on the tool itself, itself. There are ways that you can use like a smaller sticker, just something you want to use to distinguish your tool from everyone else's. I've also done that for rotary cutters. Sometimes I'll get like a bunch of address labels from like someone will send them from a different organization. They send them as thank yous for donations. They send them as solicitations for donations. And I just hold on to them and I can put them on all kind of things because it has my name and address. And that way, if I get lost or if I get lost, if my stuff gets lost, right? If someone goes home and they're looking in their basket, they're like, oh, wow, I've got 2 rotary cutters and I only brought 1 to the event. They can look inside. They can look, well, not inside. They can look on the handle and see that that one is mine. And they have a way of getting it back to me. So that's one way that stickers have been helpful for sewing. Another thing that's useful, and I think this is about a combination of different things, of sewing and crafting in particular coming together, and that's how I use adhesive vinyl. Adhesive vinyl is a thin medium that is glossy or matte on one side and tacky, sticky on the other side. You see that a lot of different companies offer it. Oracal offers adhesive vinyl. Cricut makes an adhesive vinyl. But I tend to use, there's lots of places that you can buy this vinyl, but one of it but you find it a lot on cups, bags, on all sorts of things. And I wanted to just quickly go over a few of the ways that I have used this sticker, adhesive vinyl, in my sewing. So one of the first things I did was I do a lot of embroidery. I do a lot of all sorts of crafting. I do sewing. I know how to knit to save my life. I do not know how to crochet to save my life. But knitting I can do. Sewing is my first love, which includes apparel and quilts. And so I have a lot of stuff. Also machine embroidery. So when you do machine embroidery, you end up with a lot of materials because there's all types of stabilizers that are necessary for your embroidery projects to look good when they come out. And so what I purchased was an over-the-door shoe holder, shoe sorter. And so this is it looks almost like a tower that has horizontal vinyl slots, clear, almost like these clear slots. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's like 9 of them. And what I did was I marked, I went on I use a Silhouette Cameo, which is a cutting machine. And I categorized each type of stabilizer that I had, and I put it on the pocket of the over-the-door holder. So I'm looking at them now, and I can say, okay, my top one, I have shear and cutaway stabilizer. I have wash away and solving stabilizer. I have heat, which is an iron-off stabilizer. I have a sticky. I have tear away. Like all of these different types of stabilizers, I have placed into the horizontal slots of this over-the-door shoe hanger. And so I can see at a glance how much I have of something. I have a place to put it when I buy replacements, which I do not need because I have so much of it already that I've accumulated over the years. But it is nice to keep it organized. And I know y'all know, those who've been with me for a while through the podcast, that I am a total geek about organization. I love things being organized, bags, bins, boxes, envelopes, everything, metal hangers on the wall, all of it. I am big on organization. So I find it very comforting to look over and see that I can find all my stabilizers in one place and know exactly where everything needs to go. And that's because of stickers. Another thing that came about from the using the adhesive vinyl is my sewing accessory case. Now, I bought the third. It was either the third to the top of the line Baby Lock, second or third, maybe, I don't know. It was expensive. It was an expensive machine, in my opinion. It was not the top of the line machine because the top of the line machine was $15,000. And so I went down to where something that I could buy the sewing machine and send my kids to college, right? I did not have to choose. And so this was a few years ago, I bought this machine, and I really like it. It's a Baby Lock Unity, but it did not come with an accessory case. The top of the line one came with the case, but I'm like, I'm not about to spend like an extra whole $9,000 to get a machine that comes with a case when I can make a case. So I went to some department store and I bought a Sterilite suitcase type case that had a bunch of little slots in it. And I think I'm going to try to include a picture of this either in the show notes or I can talk about it during the Instagram Live on Thursday if anyone is interested in this case. But one thing I love about it is that that's where I keep all my sewing machine feet. So I used the stickers to make I made a table in Microsoft Word, and I went through all the presser feet that I had, and I went online and found photographs of each presser foot and the name of the foot. I put that on a small sticker and then put it on the inside of the case. So now when I open the case, I know where all the sewing machine feet go, where they return, where their home is. And I also have a photograph of them, so I know like what it's supposed to look like. So if I can't tell, for example, the difference between my open toe free motion foot and the darning foot, I don't have to worry about it because I have a photo right in the slot, and I know exactly where it's supposed to go. And so that's another great way that the stickers have helped. Also, because of the way that the Silhouette Cameo is so great, is that the software is really good. And so I'm able to take a photograph of any image and then bring it into the Cameo software and trace it. And that now I'm able to have a sewing machine case that matches, quote unquote, matches my sewing machine, even though it was not an official one provided by the company. So it's like I was able to make a case for my machine where I could transport all of the feet and stuff like that, and to add my name and address. And, and that's just a lot of fun. And it's something I'm able to keep track of all my stuff, which is very helpful. The last thing, which might seem a little odd, but I tend to reuse things. So for example, I tend to sew with I tend to like a lot of mist when I sew. I think steam and pressing is really important for sewing. And so I like to use the Helene's Best Press. I know a lot of quilters like that because it's not a starch, but I find that sometimes the bottle that it comes in, the big, not the gallon size bottle, but the smaller one, that bottle, it doesn't spray as fine a mist as I would like. So I had some hair conditioner. It might have been some type of maybe Cream of Nature hair conditioner or some type of spray conditioner for my hair. And I'm guessing Cream of Nature because it has the orange cap, which is a very popular color for the Cream of Nature line. Anyway, I used all of the hair conditioner or whatever was in there. So then I rinsed it out, and I noticed that when I sprayed it, it sprayed this gorgeous, fine cloud of mist. It was wonderful. And I was like, oh man, that would be so great if I could get that to work for my for my Best Press. And so that's what I did. I got rid of all the conditioner. I used it all, and I washed the bottle out, and then I made a sticker using the adhesive vinyl in my Cameo machine that says Aileen's Best Press, or maybe it says Aileen's Best Press. And I just put it on this particular bottle, and now I have a smaller bottle that I can take places, and I know it's mine because although everybody at the quilt retreat, for example, has a bottle of Best Press, not everybody has a super skinny bottle like mine with Aileen's Best Press written on it. So that's pretty cool. Before we head into the break, I wanted to mention one more thing that also came from the episode about those materials where you can source materials beyond the fabric store. And this was a grocery store item, but because it's adhesive and it's like a sticker, just a heat-activated sticker, I wanted to once again mention the beauty that is freezer paper. I was talking with someone on Instagram who was making their first bra, and I was explaining how I like to use freezer paper for my bra pieces because I can iron them onto whatever fabric I'm cutting. If I'm cutting mesh, if I'm cutting lace, if I'm cutting the Duoplex, whatever the material is, I can iron the printed pattern piece onto that fabric and cut it out and not have to worry about it shifting, not have to worry about pins, don't have to weigh it down, which becomes really important for a bra because the pieces are so small. And it's just a nice way to just kind of be able to dive right into the cutting. And so I wanted to share the brand of freezer paper that I use. I will include a link to it in the show notes. I get it from Amazon, but if you don't mess with Amazon like that, you can find that same brand at other places, independent quilt shops, etc. It's called C. Jenkins Freezer Paper Sheets, and it's meant to be run through your inkjet printer. Don't run it through the laser printer because the laser printer is too hot and it'll probably heat activate and then you'll have a mess in your printer. But if you run this freezer paper through your inkjet printer, and it comes in 8.5 by 11 sheets, it comes in 12 by 15 sheets, you can get a pack of 50, 40, 100, 200. I tend to buy the pack of 50, which is plenty for bra making because you can reuse it. So you take the freezer paper, you run it through your inkjet printer because, which is useful because if you're using PDF patterns, which is what I'm using for my bras and for underpants and for panties, it's just nice to have it really easy to access. And then when you put the pattern away, you can put the pattern pieces back in your binder or envelope or whatever you're using to store your patterns, which might be a different conversation for another day. But my point is that there is a heat activated sticker, and it is called freezer paper. And you don't have to get these sheets that are pre-cut for your printer. It's just a bit easier to do because when you buy the freezer paper in the roll, it's curled up, and it can be a bit difficult to feed that paper curled up through your printer. But you could always flatten it. You could put it under heavy books. You could roll it in the opposite direction. There's ways around it, but I never enjoyed any of those ways. I thought they were a pain in the butt. So I just bought the paper sheets already cut out. So don't forget about freezer paper when you're thinking about how you might want to sew with stickers. When we come back, we will talk in more detail about how stickers are very useful for apparel sewing. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. The Stitch Please podcast is really growing. We've recently hit 40,000 downloads. That is a big number for a small podcast that's independently run and operated, that does not have corporate sponsors, that is a labor of love to center Black women, girls, and femmes in sewing. If you are enjoying the podcast, if you are listening to the podcast, hopefully if you are listening, you are also enjoying. I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for paying attention. Thank you for sharing the podcast with other folks who enjoy sewing and making and listening to Black women. So thank you very much for doing that. And I'd also like to ask a favor. If you are listening to the podcast on a medium that allows you to rate and review the podcasts you listen to, please drop us a rating. Things like a 5-star rating, or as well as just a few sentences in the review box, are very important for the way that the Apple, for example, recognizes podcasts. There's a certain algorithm that the more engagement you have, the better you can do. I don't know all the science. I'm not a computer science person. I got my PhD in English, so I don't know exactly how all of it works. But the part that I do understand is that ratings are good and reviews are good. And if you are able to drop us a rating and review for this podcast, we would be very, very grateful. And thank you again for listening. And we will see you at 50,000 downloads. Welcome back to the Stitch Please podcast. We're talking today about sewing with stickers. In the previous section of the episode, we talked about how you can use them to mark your tools. You can use adhesive vinyl if you have a Silhouette Cameo or a Cricut or some type of vinyl cutter that allows you to program words, phrases, images into it. And we talked also a bit about freezer paper. Now we're going to dive into a deep dive about how, when you're doing your actual garment sewing and construction, how sewing with stickers can be very helpful. I'm joined today in a wonderful voice memo from Nikki G, who is the creator of Sewing My Style, Atlanta Sewing Style. She's also got a North Carolina Sewing Style group and soon to be a DC Sewing Style. So Nikki is fantastic. And I asked her thoughts on using stickers in sewing. And this is what she had to say.
Yes, Lisa, I do enjoy using stickers. It's one of my favorite marking tools besides all the pencils and pens that I have. I particularly use it for pattern markings that I don't want to go away during construction or handling of the fabric. I use them for marking the circles, large and small circles that exist with gathers and pleats. Pocket placement is the number one area where I use stickers. A zipper stop. Anywhere where I have need for that particular mark to stay in place, because there's a lot of pressing and heat going into the garment constructions, and the stickers stay put, I don't forget, and they're there and give me accuracy also.
I'm glad Nikki was able to send me that voice memo to talk about her experience of sewing with stickers. I really think it's really wonderful to be able to pull all these really good ideas together and hope that they will land in ways that are useful for all of us and folks who are listening. And I know I'm listening and learning as well. I wanted to go into my ridiculously elaborate approach to sewing with stickers. But before I do that, I'm going to share one more thing about I'm going to start with talking about the materials that I use. This is a 3-step process. Well, it's actually more than 3 steps, but this is it requires 3 materials, all of which you can get from the office supply store. The first is blue painter's tape. I'm using the 3M brand Scotch Blue Painter's Tape for multi-surfaces, number 2090. I mention this because this is what's worked for me. I have not had any problem with residue from adhesive on fabric. I've been able to put the stickers that I'm going to describe onto the fabric without any type of issue or negative issue. And so this is where I say, this is the disclaimer, be sure to test anything that you are using on your fabric, whether it's chalk, markers, pens, pencils, stickers, anything. You want to always test it before you commit to putting it all over your garment. So just be sure to test. This has worked for me in all the things that I sew, but I do recommend it. I recommend it with the caveat that you test it for everything that you want to sew to see if it'll work for you. Because don't be in my DMs like, oh, Black Women Stitch told me to put this tape on my stuff and now my stuff's messed up. Black Women Stitch told you to test it before you put it on there. So test. And then we'll dive right in. So, but the 3M tape that I'm using is the 1 inch. It also requires the address labels that I mentioned earlier, which are 1/2 inch by. I'm sorry, they're 1/2 inch by 1 3/4. So it's like a long curved rectangle. And then the other thing that I use is also a Scotch tape from 3M, and it's the type that's labeled transparent. I do sometimes use, because I really like this tape, I like the satin gift wrap tape. The satin finish gift wrap tape, but I believe I get the best results with the transparent tape, and I think I got this at the Dollar Tree. So these are the 3 things that I use: the return address labels, transparent Scotch tape, and 3M blue painter's tape for multi-surfaces. And you know that there's a lot of science that goes into all of these. They test them to see, for example, when you put tape on the wall and for some reason you decide to leave it up there for, 7 weeks or something, they can say, okay, well, you can take this down and it won't harm your surfaces if you leave it up there for longer than you're supposed to. So all of this testing goes into it. And so that's the reason I'm giving you the brand names, not to boost them up, because I'm not affiliated with any of these companies, but just to say that this is what I know has worked for me. And so before I get into the details about how I use all these materials, I wanted to say something that I was really happy to have learned is that if, for example, you buy 2 rolls of the blue painter's tape, one of the things that you can do with this blue painter's tape is if you buy 2 rolls, one, you want to use them to do your stickers for your, to organize your sewing pattern pieces, which is the process I'm going to describe to you next. But if you want to have a second one, you can use them as a seam gauge. Now, I don't mean just taking a piece of tape and laying it down on the bed of your sewing machine, and then just having that piece of tape be the gauge. No, I mean, you can take a roll of this tape. So say you have a roll and at its fullest, it could be, I'm not sure, like if you measure from the core of the paper core of the tape and you measure outward to the blue ring, say it's about maybe a 1/2 inch thick, right? You can, this is something you could do when you get to the end, or you could designate a tape roll just for this. You can take an X-Acto knife and very carefully dig deep down and make a very deep score through, I don't know, maybe 10 layers of the tape. You make a deep, deep score line, and then you go you proceed maybe 3 inches or 2 inches in the other direction, maybe 2, and do another deep, deep, deep score mark where you're cutting through 10 layers of tape. When you peel off that 10-layer, 2-inch strip, what you have is an adhesive seam guide. And the reason I like to talk about using 10 layers of tape, for example, or even 15 layers of tape, is because as you use it and you stick it on the bed of your machine, it creates a ridge, an actual ridge that will help you to make sure you're sewing with the proper seam allowance. Now, of course, we all know that the bed of the machine has grooves and marks in it that tell you what the seam allowance is. Sometimes I have to remember to put my needle all the way to the left, which is the distance from which the seam allowance on my machine is measured. It's measured from that 5/8 inch mark. It's not 5/8 from the center of the needle. The center of the foot is always 5/8 from the left. But one of the reasons I like to use this tape is, for example, if I'm using my walking foot, which is huge, the Baby Lock digital walking foot is like a BB-8. I mean, it is so heavy and thick, and you have to plug it in. It goes to the back of the machine so it can connect to the laser. I mean, it really is kind of like BB-8. It's not like the walking foot I used to have on my other machines, the standard one that goes cha-chunk, 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 more like an AT-AT walker, an AT-AT walker. But this is more like a BB-8. I'm now realizing that I'm really doing a deep dive into the Star Wars references. Star Trek, goodness. The Star Wars. I know that Star Wars is BB-8, and I know that the AT-AT walkers or AT-AT walkers are also from Star Wars. But anyway, my point is sometimes when you're sewing, you want to be able to shift, keep your eye on where the seam is going to be. So most of us have a really good understanding of where the 5/8 inch mark is since if we've sewn with these kind of standard patterns most of our sewing lives. But sometimes you need to have a hem that's 1 1/4, or you have that foot on and you can't see where the 5/8 mark is. And so I will have a roll of tape that is just for that purpose. A roll of blue painter's tape that I then do a really deep, deep, deep score mark where I'm going through 10 to 15 layers of tape. And what's great about that is after it stops being sticky for a while, all you have to do is peel off that bottommost layer of tape, and you've got a fresh layer of tape and adhesive that you can then put on the bed of the sewing machine or the serger. And I also used it for my cover stitch machine. I've used it for the cover stitch. And so it really does keep things, helps you it helps keep the line straight. I think that for me, when I'm sewing and I have a piece of just a regular flat one layer of tape as a visual guide, I can sometimes run past that. But when I have a thick, like a ridge of the 10 to 15 layers of tape, it creates almost like a channel that keeps keeps the fabric, from running over beyond that where the tape is marked. And so that's something I really appreciate about this Blue Painter's tape. That's another option for you. So let's just dive into organizing these pattern pieces for sewing. So to clarify, you will need 4 things if you want to do the sewing with stickers, not just the 3 that I mentioned. So, oops, my bad. So the first thing you'll need is the return address labels. Again, I mentioned that they come 80 on a sheet. They're 1/2 inch tall and 1 3/4 inch long. This is very standard. I'm saying it's very standard because you need to use them I use them with a Microsoft Word program that comes with templates for stickers. And this is already populated into Microsoft Word, this template. I think that the one that I have here is the same size as Avery 8167. And I bought this pack from Office Depot, which had 2,000 labels in it. And I think I've had this for, 12 years. Our Office Depot closed a long time ago. And I still have these Office Depot brand return address labels. So if you get some, they will last you a really long time. The second thing you'll need is the 3M tape, the 3M Blue Painter's tape that I was mentioning. And the third thing is the Scotch transparent tape. The fourth thing is you will need something to stick these stickers onto when you're not using them. And so what I use is a page protector. You know how they have page protectors, sheets protectors. You put them in your binders. You put the sheet of paper down in the binder. This is just a clear plastic film that it's 2 layers because it's basically a pocket. And so I take that, I deconstruct it by tearing off the 3-hole punch side, and then I cut it into quarters, which gives me 8 rectangles. And the great thing about these 8 rectangles is that they fit very well into Big 4 pattern envelopes, which I have a zillion of. And so one of the things that I love about this method is that if I find a pattern that I really like and I want to make it more than once and it has a lot of pieces in it, it's like I've given myself a gift when I go to sew it, because I get the pattern out of the pattern drawer, I open the pattern up, and I'm like, oh, look, all my stickers are already in here. So I'll be able to do the things that I enjoy doing with this pattern and not have to wonder, about not just the order of pieces, but how many I'm cutting. Anyway, so it's just a great method. So let's get started. So essentially what you're doing is creating a map for your pattern cutting using these stickers as a guide. So you're creating a map for your cutting using these stickers as a guide. Maybe this sounds confusing. In my head, it's sounding very clear, but I think it's sounding clear because I do it all the time, and the challenge is to be able to kind of effectively explain this. And so, like when you go to your guide sheet, you will see a list of pattern pieces. I remember once I made my son, who is now 16, he was 3 years old at the time. I made him this wonderful shirt from Autobri Designs. And Autobri Designs was a new magazine to me. It's German. And the patterns come kind of like Berta, where all of the pattern pieces are all crisscrossed and layered onto one sheet. And you have to follow the colors as well as the region on the pattern map so that you're tracing the right color. Anyway, I made this baby this gorgeous little shirt that had epaulets and covered pocket buttons. And the upshot was the shirt for the 3-year-old had 22 pieces. 22 pieces. I still remember that. That was a long time ago, but you can still see I feel some kind of way about it because that was a lot of work for a 3-year-old shirt. Now, of course, who do I have to blame? Myself. Who do I give credit for making an amazing ass shirt? Also myself. But it was a lot of pattern pieces to keep track of. And so for me, I like to know, cutting is not my favorite part. So I like to know how much I have left to cut and when this part is all going to be over. And so for me, having the list of pattern pieces already printed onto stickers is really helpful for that. So the way that I do it is I go to the guide sheet and I look up all the pattern pieces, and sometimes I'll include the numbers. So, it's pretty standard. Piece 1 is the front bodice, piece 2 is the back bodice, piece 3 is the sleeve, piece 4, and just kind of so on and so on. But sometimes when patterns are very complicated, like this dress that I just finished, well, it's Zoom ready. It looks great. It's great. It's still a great dress. I just have not put the hem on yet. It has a hem facing. This was a 6-piece hem facing. And I wouldn't be able to tell just by looking at it, is this the lower left side or the lower right side, especially when both sides of your fabric look very much the same. And so the stickers were incredibly important for that. So I sit down at the computer with my pattern guide sheets. And because the return address labels have 80 per sheet, I try to do as many as I can. So typically if I'm going to like a pattern sale or if I'm on a kick, it's like, oh, I want to make a bunch of blouses or I want to make a bunch of men's shirts or whatever. Let me just sit down and pull these patterns. And if I haven't made stickers for them yet, let me go ahead and do that. I will take a whole stack of guide sheets and just go through them. And that does take some time. So when I sit down, I go to my Microsoft Word program. I open up the template for Avery 8167, which is 80 return address labels. I then go through and list all the pattern pieces for a particular garment. When I get ready to go to the next set of pattern pieces, I'll change the colors so that I can tell what garment goes with what. So if I have five patterns and they're, they range from easy to moderate or maybe moderate to advanced, I could, if I have 5 of them, I could pretty easily get close to filling up the 80 pattern pieces, right? So if there's 5 of them, y'all know me and math are challenged, but if there's 5 of them and there's 20 pieces per, 5 times, that could be 100, so obviously don't do that much because sometimes it is kind of tedious. I have to admit, I love this method. I consider this method giving a gift to myself, but I also have to kind of be in the mood for it because it can be a pain. You can also just print partial sheets of these by leaving space in between the address labels. So say, for example, you only want to do 2. Do 1, skip a row of stickers, then do another one, and then print it off, and then peel the stickers off, as I'm going to explain, and leave the whole sheet intact so you can run it through the printer again. So you don't have to sit down and do this whole slog. I mean, I've done that, and it is very unpleasant to sit down if you're not in the mood for it. But if you are, and for me, I like looking at all the pattern pieces and how they're going to fit together. And I also do them even for the views that I'm not interested in sewing, but I might be. So I sit down, put all of the fabric, I sit down and put all of the pattern piece information into the Microsoft Word grid, which is pre-populated because it's a template. Right? So you go to your Microsoft Word program, you open up mailings, you open up, I think I think it's like templates or return address envelopes or something, and you can select the template to find all of your return address label templates. And it's a whole ton of templates built into Microsoft Word, which is what I use. For those who use other programs, I'm not sure. And again, I'm not actually sure how popular Microsoft Word is these days, since a lot of kids and a lot of other folks, adults too, use Google, what's that called? Google Docs. But I do like Word because I like the templates. And so if you do use Word, you can use the templates, as well as I think on the Avery site, they have templates that you can design right there on their website. I find it cumbersome, so which is why I prefer to do it in Word. And it's also, I'm more used to it. So anyway, you sit down, you put in all of the pieces for your garment. You type all of them in and populate the table or the template. Then you print it off. So after you've printed it off, you now have your printed sheet of 80 or so, or 20, or however many pieces you decided to print that are ready then to be used. The next step is to take those labels and to place them at a distance from each other horizontally along the long edge of your blue painter's tape. So you take your painter's tape, you hold it in one hand, you peel off a label, and you smooth it onto the blue painter's tape. And then you leave a space. I leave maybe like a 1/2 inch space between every label. That might give me a chance to basically surround the tape in maybe, 5 or 6 labels. The next step, the third step, is basically the lamination step. And that's why I like to use the Scotch transparent tape. And the 3M tape is 3/4 of an inch wide, which means it covers the 1/2 inch tape by a good margin. And this is important because you don't want to go through all this trouble and then just have them peel off. And so that's why I like to use the materials that I'm describing to you. I like using the 1 inch blue tape and the 3/4 inch, which is a standard Scotch tape roll, and the return address labels, because everything fits. So the labels themselves are a 1/2 inch. The tape that it's laminating the labels is 3/4 inch. And the base on which both of these things are going to be stuck is 1 inch. And so those increments work really well, and it makes for a tidy little set of labels or of stickers. And so once you then do the 3 steps, which is to print your return address labels, put your return address labels on your blue painter's tape, then cover those with the transparent tape. You can peel off that layer, then use your paper scissors to cut them into increments. This will give you reusable laminated stickers that you can use for your sewing patterns. And I then put those labels that I've cut up and put them right onto that transparent sheet that I was telling you about, where I cut the page protectors into quarters. I put that on there. And so I put the pieces on there. So say, for example, I'm doing a garment and it has, I just recently did one, I think it had, 18 pieces. And as I was cutting, I could see the numbers start to go down. And soon I started with 18 and I was like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? Why do I want to make this? I don't even want to make it anymore. But I was like, oh, well, I got my Marimekko sheets. I already have my idea. I'm pretty excited. And the Marimekko one, that garment was not that complicated. But the next one is going to be. And so I'm just basically cutting away at the 18 pieces required for this dress, because it's a color block dress and no 2 pieces are the same. And as I'm cutting, I realize that I have fewer and fewer stickers on the page protector sheet. And so I'm like, wow, I'm really getting there. And so it's a nice way to measure your progress as you're going. Then when you put the stickers onto your fabric as you're sewing, this was the most helpful. When I was working on the hem for this dress, the one that I'm trying to fix, well, not fix because it's not broken, but finish, it was really helpful to not just have the name of the pattern, but the number of the pattern piece. And I say that because the dress that I was sewing had 2 views, and each view had different numbers for the pieces. And so if I had just put down the name and not the number, when it came to doing the actual work of putting it together, it really would have taken me a minute to remember what part went where. And so I found myself, again, being grateful for taking the time to put the full pattern number alongside the name of the pattern piece. Again, it's very easy to tell a front bodice piece from a back bodice piece. I mean, you can pretty much tell that because the shape of the neck is different. We can always tell our backs and stuff from the fronts if we use the single notch versus double notch or triple notch and all that. But I just find this so much, it just makes the sewing that much easier. And it just gives me a sense of understanding in some ways, understanding how the pieces of the garment go together, as well as understanding how much progress I have made. And so as I'm doing the sewing, I peel off the sticker and put it back onto that transparent sheet. And so when I'm all done with the sewing, I put that transparent sheet with all the different pattern pieces labeled and adhesives, because they're stickers, ready to go the next time. And if I like the dress and want to make it again, I can pull out the stickers and make another copy and make another version. And I do that for almost all of my sewing patterns, especially if it's something I'm going to sew more than once. And so I really enjoy that particular method of keeping track of pattern pieces. And so that is how I sew with stickers. And thanks for listening today. We talked about using the stickers to mark your sewing tools. We talked about adhesive vinyl. We talked about parchment paper. We talked a bit with Nikki from Sewing My Style and Atlanta Sewing Style. And then we talked about using it as a seam gauge. So there's all kind of ways that you can sew with stickers, but always test before you do anything, so you can make sure that it's going to work for you. It's worked great for me, and I do really like it as a way to keep track of my pattern pieces as I am doing garment sewing. So thanks again for listening, and we will see you next week. And we can also talk about this some more on the Instagram Live, which is scheduled for Thursdays. We do them on Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Black Women Stitch page. So come through if you have the time. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Stitch Please podcast, the official podcast of Black Women Stitch, the sewing group where Black Lives Matter. There are a variety of ways that you can support the program, and you're doing it right now. By listening to the podcast, it does help us grow. Another way to do that is to rate the podcast, review it, subscribe to it. All of these things are ways that you can support the podcast without having to spend any money at all. If you would like to spend some money to support us, there are ways to do that as well. You can make direct donations to our Patreon site for monthly contributions, as well as one-time contributions to PayPal, Cash App, or Venmo. And finally, we have another cute, very adorable way for you to support the Black Women Stitch Project. It's a pin, a PIN enamel lapel pin that's very cute. It's about 2 inches wide and 1.5 inch tall, and it's of the Black Women Stitch logo. And that is $15 with free shipping to the U.S. And so if you drop $15 in the PayPal, Venmo, or Cash App accounts, and then send me your if you send me your mailing address to my email, either at blackwomenstitch@gmail.com, or you send me a direct message on the Black Women Stitch Instagram page, we will put the pin in the mail to you. Again, free shipping, $15 for the pin, and all of this goes to support the Black Women Stitch Project. Thank you again for joining us this week. Come back next week, and we will help you get your stitch together.